My workplace rival, Veronica, presented my entire marketing strategy to our boss as her own, publicly dismissing me as too junior to lead. I just sipped my coffee and stayed silent, letting her have her moment of glory. She'll be thrilled with her promotion until she tries to access the project's second phase, which is encrypted, watermarked with my digital signature, and attached to a time-stamped email I sent to the CEO a week ago. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The air in the conference room was stale, thick with the scent of lukewarm coffee and corporate ambition. I sat at the far end of the long mahogany table, a ghost in my own narrative. My hands were wrapped around a ceramic mug, the warmth a small, grounding anchor in the churning sea of my disbelief. On the large screen at the front of the room, my life's work from the past 6 months was being paraded around by a thief. Slide after slide, a kaleidoscope of my own data visualizations, my taglines, my meticulously crafted consumer profiles, flashed before the eyes of the executive team. And there was Veronica, my manager, basking in the glow of the projector like it was a spotlight she had earned. She gestured at my charts with a proprietary flourish, her voice smooth and confident as she co-opted my analysis. "As you can see," she said, pointing to a demographic breakdown I had stayed up until 3 a.m. perfecting. "The key to penetrating the millennial market isn't just about social media presence. It's about creating an ecosystem of authentic engagement." My words, my theory, my ecosystem. A low-grade fever I'd been fighting all morning spiked, and a wave of dizziness washed over me. I'd almost called in sick, my body begging for rest after weeks of relentless work, but the Project Titan presentation was today. I couldn't miss it. I had imagined this moment so differently. I thought Veronica would be presenting my work, yes, but giving me credit, positioning me as the architect. I was her senior strategist, after all. It was supposed to be a collaborative victory. Instead, it was a heist in broad daylight. Mr. Harrison, the vice president of marketing, leaned forward, his elbows on the polished table, his expression rapt. He was a man who loved bold strokes and hated messy details, and Veronica was painting him a masterpiece with my brush, my paints, and my canvas. "This is brilliant, Veronica. Truly," he said, his voice booming slightly in the quiet room. "The scope of this is comprehensive. How did you manage to pull all this research together so quickly?" I felt a faint flicker of hope. Surely this was the moment. This was when she would say, "Well, my senior strategist Daphne was instrumental. She led the deep dive." I held my breath. Veronica smiled, a practiced, humble curve of her lips that didn't quite reach her eyes. "It took a lot of sleepless nights, Richard," she said, using his first name with an easy familiarity I could never muster. "But when you're passionate about a project, it doesn't feel like work. I just saw the potential and knew I had to take the lead and drive it home myself." The air left my lungs in a silent rush. Drive it home myself. She had erased me from my own story. The presentation continued. She moved into the second phase of the strategy, the execution plan, my execution plan. She breezed past the complex media buying schedules and the influencer partnership tiers I had painstakingly negotiated. She didn't understand the nuance, the delicate balance of the budget I'd fought for, but she knew how to read a slide. As she reached the final slide, a projection of a 25% market share increase within 2 years, Mr. Harrison looked over at me for the first time. His gaze was dismissive, almost paternalistic. "Daphne," he said, his tone casual, "as the junior member of this team, what are your thoughts? Does this all track with you?" Junior member. I was 29, a senior strategist with a master's degree and 7 years of experience. I had personally built the models that produced those projections. The question was a public pat on the head, a gesture to show he was inclusive while reinforcing my irrelevance. Before I could formulate a response, Veronica jumped in, her voice laced with that infuriating, feigned protectiveness. "Oh, Richard, I think this might be a little too high level for Daphne at this stage. She's a great support, but she's simply too junior to lead such a big project. We need seasoned leadership to ensure Titan lands successfully." The words hung in the air, each one a tiny, sharp dart piercing my composure. Too junior. It wasn't just a dismissal, it was a public branding, an attempt to permanently cap my potential in the eyes of the man who decided promotions. Evrio. Knee at the table nodded in agreement. I was no longer Daphne, the architect of the plan. I was Daphne, the junior support staff, lucky to even have a seat at the table. I looked at Veronica, who was now soaking in Mr. Harrison's effusive praise. I looked at my slides, my data, my work, all attributed to her. The dizziness, the fever, the sheer exhaustion, it all coalesced into a single, cold point of clarity in my mind. The shock was profound, a physical blow that left me breathless. But underneath it, something else was stirring. A quiet, glacial resolve. I picked up my coffee mug, took a slow, deliberate sip, and set it down without a sound. I remained silent. The betrayal was far, far worse than any illness. The meeting ended with a round of applause for Veronica. Not a thunderous, standing ovation, but the polite, corporate kind of clapping that still felt like 1,000 tiny slaps to my face. I gathered my notepad and pen, my movements slow and robotic. My mind was a maelstrom of anger and humiliation, but on the surface, I projected a calm I was nowhere near feeling. I had to get back to my desk before the fragile dam holding back my emotions broke. My workspace, usually a sanctuary of organized creativity, felt alien. The sticky notes mapping out the very strategy I'd just seen stolen seemed to mock me from my monitor. My chest was so tight it was hard to breathe. I sank into my chair, staring blankly at the screen, the cursor blinking in an empty document. "You're quiet." I jumped. It was Maya, my closest friend at the firm and a fellow strategist. She pulled her rolling chair over from her adjacent cubicle, her brow furrowed with concern. She had been in the meeting, and she had a keen eye for office politics. "Did you just see that?" I whispered, my voice hoarse. "I saw it," she said, her own voice low and simmering with indignation. "I saw a grand larceny happen in real time. Daphne, she took everything. The ecosystem, the demographic analysis, she even used your phrase, digital authenticity." I almost choked on my water. Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes, hot and sudden. "She called me junior, Maya, in front of the entire leadership team." "I know," Maya said, placing a comforting hand on my arm. "It was disgusting. Calculated. She was cutting you off at the knees before you could even think to stand up. What are you going to do? You have to go to Mr. Harrison. You have to go to HR. You have proof, your files, your drafts." I shook my head, a slow, weary motion. "And what will they see?" I asked, the bitterness rising in my throat. "They'll see a disgruntled junior employee picking a fight with her successful manager. She's already framed the narrative. It would be my word against hers, and she's the one Harrison just anointed as the project savior." Maya deflated, knowing I was right. In a corporate power play, the person with the institutional backing almost always won. Veronica had secured the backing. I was, as she'd so expertly established, just a support player. Just then, a shadow fell over my desk. We both looked up. It was Veronica, walking toward us with a triumphant glide in her step. She was holding a celebratory latte from the expensive coffee shop downstairs, a treat she usually reserved for closing major deals. "Daphne, a word," she said, ignoring Maya completely. Maya gave my arm a final squeeze and rolled back to her desk, though her eyes remained on us, watchful and protective. Veronica leaned against the partition of my cubicle, feigning a casual air. "Listen, I just wanted to touch base after that meeting," she began, her tone dripping with condescending sympathy. "I know it can be tough to see a project you've assisted on get handed off, but this is a really big opportunity for the department, and it needed a firm, experienced hand at the wheel." "I understand," I said, my voice flat, devoid of the emotion she was likely hoping to provoke. "Good, I'm glad you see the bigger picture," she said, taking a sip of her latte. Don't worry, I'll be sure to keep you involved in some of the smaller tasks. There will be plenty of support work to go around. You'll get your chance to lead something big someday when you're ready. She was twisting the knife, enjoying her victory lap. She wanted to see me upset. She wanted me to complain or argue so she could label me as emotional and uncooperative. I refused to give her the satisfaction. I simply nodded, my gaze fixed on my monitor. Okay, Veronica, thank you for letting me know. Her smile faltered for a fraction of a second. My placid reaction was not what she'd expected. She had come for drama, for tears, for a fight she knew she would win. My quiet compliance seemed to unnerve her more than any protest would have. Right, well, she said, straightening up. I'll be sending out the official project charter and timeline later today. I'll expect everyone on the team to hit the ground running tomorrow, Mo. Arning, we have a lot of work to do. She turned and walked away, the scent of her sweet, milky coffee lingering in the air like a taunt. Maya immediately rolled back over. I don't know how you did that. I wanted to throw my stapler at her head. A small, cold smile finally touched my lips. It was a grim, unfamiliar feeling. Because fighting her now would be pointless, Maya. She thinks she's already won. I looked at the blinking cursor on my screen, and the fury that had been churning inside me began to solidify, crystallizing into a diamond-hard point of focus. Veronica, in her arrogance, believed she had thought of everything. She had positioned herself perfectly, discredited me, and claimed the prize. But in her haste to build her own pedestal, she had forgotten one crucial thing. She thought the presentation was the project, but the presentation was just the map. She had no idea that the territory itself was locked, and only I held the key. The idea for Project Titan had come to me on a rainy Sunday afternoon 3 months prior. I was curled up on my sofa, buried under a mountain of industry reports and consumer trend analyses, a habit I had for staying ahead of the curve. Our company, a legacy brand in the consumer electronics space, was losing its grip on the younger demographic. Our products were solid, reliable, but utterly devoid of the cultural currency that drove modern purchasing decisions. We were seen as the brand your parents trusted, which was a death sentence in the tech world. That's when the concept struck me, not as a single marketing campaign, but as a total strategic overhaul. A fundamental shift from selling products to building a brand-centric lifestyle. I called it Project Titan in my private notes because the task felt monumental, godlike in its ambition. For the next 6 months, it became my obsession. I sacrificed weekends, staying late to build the financial models that proved its viability. I gave up my evenings, conducting informal focus groups with my friends and their younger siblings to understand the nuances of their digital lives. I mapped out every detail, from the macro-level philosophy down to the micro-level execution. The precise cadence of social media posts, the multi-tiered structure for influencer collaborations, the wireframes for a new interactive app. This wasn't just a project, it was the culmination of my entire professional ethos. It was my masterpiece. When I first brought the initial concept to Veronica, her reaction was lukewarm. It's a lot, Daphne, she'd said, flipping through my preliminary deck with a distracted air. Very ambitious, probably unrealistic. The budget alone would never get approved. Veronica had been my manager for 2 years, and our dynamic was established early on. She was a master of appearances. Her office was immaculate, her outfits were impeccably tailored, and her corporate jargon was second to none. She excelled at managing up, at schmoozing with executives like Mr. Harrison, and presenting a polished veneer of competence. But when it came to the actual, gritty work of strategy, she was a hollow shell. Her talent lay not in creating, but in curating, or more accurately, in appropriating. She'd done it before in smaller ways. A clever turn of phrase I'd used in a team meeting would suddenly appear in her report to the VP. A small, successful social media test I'd run would be mentioned in a meeting as an initiative she was exploring. They were minor thefts, death by 1,000 paper cuts, and always deniable. I could never prove it. She was my boss. Of course, my work would roll up under her name. But Project Titan was different. It was too big, too integrated for her to simply slice off a piece. So for months, she kept it at arm's length. Ask for updates, her interest seemingly peaked only when I mentioned a particularly successful data point. Interesting, she'd murmur, peering at my screen with a little too much focus. Send me that spreadsheet, will you? I might want to use it for the quarterly review. She never offered a single creative idea. Her feedback was always critical, vague, and designed to temper my ambition. Let's not get ahead of ourselves, she'd say. The C-suite is conservative. You need to simplify this. Dumb it down. I politely ignored her, trusting my own instincts. I knew the power of the idea was in its complexity, its interconnectedness. So I built it in secret, late at night, on my personal hard drive. I coded the interactive budget models myself, embedded hidden watermarks in the graphic assets I designed, and structured the project files in a way only I could fully navigate. It wasn't that I explicitly expected a full-scale heist, but my subconscious was clearly ringing alarm bells. My gut knew Veronica couldn't be trusted. The week before the presentation, I finally had a complete end-to-end strategy document. It was over 100 pages long, a symphony of data, activity, and logistical planning. I knew it was the best work I had ever done. And I knew, with a sinking certainty, that Veronica would never let me be the one to present it. She had been asking about the Titan thing with increasing frequency, sensing its potential. That was when I decided to take out an insurance policy. The initial shock from the meeting had passed, leaving behind a cold, clear-headed fury. The passive victim I had been, sitting stunned at that conference table, was gone. In her place was a strategist, and Veronica had just become my new, most important project. I spent the rest of the day in a state of meticulous, quiet preparation. My investigation wasn't about uncovering what Veronica had done. I had witnessed that firsthand. It was about ensuring the trap I had laid was perfectly set. First, I logged into my sent emails. My heart hammered against my ribs as I scrolled down, my eyes scanning the dates. There it was, sent last Tuesday at 11:48 p.m. The subject line was carefully worded, confidential pre-brief, a high-potential initiative for market growth. The recipient was Mr. Robert Sterling, the CEO. The body of the email was brief and professional. Dear Mr. Sterling, apologies for the unsolicited email. Following the last quarterly town hall, where you emphasized the need for bold, forward-thinking strategy, I felt compelled to share a comprehensive proposal I have been developing. It outlines a potential new direction for the brand that I believe has significant merit. I have attached the full strategy document for Project Titan for your review at your convenience. I understand your time is valuable, but I am confident that the data within will speak for itself. Sincerely, Daphne Miller, Senior Marketing Strategist. I had hesitated for a full hour before hitting send that night. It was a bold move, going over my manager, and my VP's head directly to the CEO. It could have been perceived as an act of arrogant insubordination. But I had banked on Mr. Sterling's reputation. He was known as a no-nonsense leader who had risen through the ranks of product development, not sales. He respected data and innovation above all else. I was gambling that he would see my email not as a breach of protocol, but as a sign of initiative. I opened the attachment from the sent email, Project Titan Full Strategy D. Miller, PDF. It loaded perfectly. 112 pages of my work, time-stamped by the email server. The first domino was in place. Next, I turned to the project files themselves. The presentation Veronica had given was only phase 1, the strategy. It was the what and the why. But phase 2 was the how. It lived in a separate, encrypted folder on the company's shared server. It contained the final budget allocations, the signed preliminary agreements with media partners, the contact lists for the influencers, and the creative briefs for the ad agencies. It was the engine of the entire project. Using a dummy employee profile Maya helped me access, I tried to open the Phase 2 folder. A dialog box immediately appeared on the screen. Access DENIED. This folder is encrypted. Please contact the project administrator for access. I smiled. The project administrator was me. I had used a level of encryption that our standard IT department couldn't bypass without a series of security keys that existed only in my head and on a thumb drive currently locked in a drawer at my apartment. Finally, I opened one of the core asset files from the Phase 1 deck that Veronica had so proudly presented. I went into the file's metadata. There, invisible to the casual observer but clear as day in the file details, was the digital watermark. Author, Daphne Miller. Created, July 15, 2025. Every single slide she had claimed, as her own, had my digital fingerprint all over it. My work wasn't just stolen, it was booby-trapped. Veronica was currently striding through a minefield she couldn't see, and she was about to take a very wrong step. The email I had been waiting for arrived at 4:32 p.m. It was from Veronica, sent to the entire marketing department. Subject kickoff, Project Titan. Team. Further to the exciting announcement from Richard Harrison today, I am thrilled to be officially leading Project Titan. This is a game-changing initiative, and I am confident that with our collective efforts, we can achieve spectacular results. Please find attached the official project charter. I expect everyone to review it thoroughly. We will be having a mandatory kickoff meeting tomorrow at 9 a.m. sharp to align on deliverables for the week. Let's get to work. Veronica Vance. Director, Project Titan. Director, Project Titan. She had already given herself a new title. The sheer audacity was almost impressive. I saw Maya peek over the cubicle wall, her eyes wide with outrage. I just gave her a slow, steady nod. The game was on. I didn't have to fight, I didn't have to complain or protest. All I had to do was wait for the trap to spring itself. The next morning, an air of feigned excitement buzzed around the office. Veronica was holding court near the coffee machine, accepting congratulations from colleagues who were either oblivious or too politically savvy to question the narrative. I kept my head down, nursing a cup of tea, the picture of a diligent worker bee. At precisely 9:05 a.m., Veronica strode into the meeting room where the rest of the marketing team was assembled. She was glowing, energized by her newfound power. "All right, everyone, let's begin," she announced, taking her place at the head of the table. "As you know, Project Titan is now officially underway. The strategy has been approved, and now we move into execution. Speed is of the essence. I want the new social media accounts live by the end of the week, and the preliminary outreach to our Tier 1 influencers needs to start today." She pulled out her laptop. "I'm sharing the link to the Phase 2 asset folder now. Everything you need is in there: budgets, creative briefs, contact lists. I've broken it down by team. Let's." Her voice trailed off. She clicked her mouse a few times, her brow furrowing slightly. Seems the server is a little slow this morning." A few people chuckled nervously. I took a slow, deliberate sip of my tea, my eyes fixed on her. This was the moment. She clicked again, more forcefully this time. A faint blush began to creep up her neck. "Okay, just a minor tech issue. 1 second." She typed furiously, her confident facade beginning to crack at the edges. Finally, she stopped, staring at her screen in disbelief. The Access DNIED message was staring back at her, a digital dead end. The room was silent. Everyone was watching her. She, the great leader, the newly minted director of Project Titan, couldn't access her own project files. The embarrassment was a palpable force in the room. She looked up, her eyes scanning the team before they landed, with venomous precision on me. Later that afternoon, she cornered me at my desk. She had abandoned all pretense of mentorship. Her face was a tight mask of fury. "What did you do?" she hissed, her voice low enough that only I could hear. I looked up from my work, my expression a carefully crafted canvas of polite confusion. "I'm sorry, Veronica. What are you referring to?" "The project files," she seethed. "Phase 2, they're locked, I can't get in, I know you did something." "Oh, the Titan files?" I said, feigning a moment of realization. "That's strange, I haven't touched them since last week, but I'm not assigned to that project anymore, remember? Mr. Harrison made that clear, you're the director." The word director was a subtle jab, a reminder of the title she had stolen and now couldn't legitimize with action. Her eyes narrowed. "This is not a game, Daphne. I have a deadline from Mr. Harrison. You are being insubordinate and deliberately sabotaging a company project. Unlock the files. Now." This was the first confrontation, the moment she revealed her true nature. Not with a clever political maneuver, but with a raw, desperate threat. She was cornered, and she was lashing out. I leaned back in my chair, my calm demeanor a stark contrast to her barely contained panic. "I'm not sure I can, Veronica. Those files are my intellectual property. I created them on my own time, as part of a proposal. Since I'm not leading the project, I don't feel comfortable releasing them. It wouldn't be appropriate." "Your intellectual property?" she scoffed, her voice rising in volume. A few heads in the surrounding cubicles popped up, sensing the drama. "That work was done for this company. It belongs to me now. I'm the director." "I don't think that's how intellectual property works," I replied calmly. "But I'm sure HR has a policy document we could review together if you're confused." Her face went from red to a startling, pale white. Mentioning HR was a direct challenge to her authority, a sign that I was not the timid junior employee she thought she could bully into submission. Her poorly executed threat had failed, and in doing so, it had only confirmed her guilt. She had no legitimate claim to the work, and my refusal to yield proved it. She stood there for a moment, sputtering, unable to form a coherent response. Finally, she spun on her heel and stormed off in the direction of Mr. Harrison's office. Maya rolled over to my desk the second she was gone. "Round 1 goes to Daphne," she whispered, a grin spreading across her face. "That was masterful, she walked right into it." I felt a surge of adrenaline, but I knew this was far from over. Veronica had just played her first card. Now she was going to the VP. The stakes were about to get much, much higher. Less than an hour later, I received the summons I was expecting. An email from Mr. Harrison's assistant with a subject line that was both terse and ominous. "Urgent meeting." I walked towards the executive suite, my steps steady, my resolve firm. The fear and humiliation I had felt just 24 hours ago had been burned away, replaced by a cold, hard sense of purpose. Veronica had made this a war, and I was now fully prepared for battle. I entered Mr. Harrison's office to find him pacing behind his large oak desk, a deep frown etched on his face. Veronica was sitting in one of the chairs opposite the desk, her expression a carefully composed mask of wronged victimhood. She had clearly just given him her version of events, the tale of a brilliant, hardworking manager being sabotaged by a jealous and petty underling. "Daphne, close the door," Mr. Harrison said without preamble. I did as he asked and took the empty seat a few feet away from Veronica. "Veronica tells me you have locked her out of the Titan project files," he began, his voice laced with profound disappointment. "She says you are claiming they are your intellectual property and are refusing to cooperate. Is this true?" "Yes, that is true," I said simply. Mr. Harrison stopped pacing and stared at me, dumbfounded by my directness. "I don't think you understand the seriousness of this, Daphne. This is insubordination. Project Titan is a critical company priority. You are jeopardizing its launch and your entire career here. I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but it ends now. You will go back to your desk and grant Veronica full access immediately." Veronica smirked, a flicker of triumph in her eyes. She thought she had won. She had the VP on her side, and he was giving me a direct order. I took a slow breath, marshaling my thoughts. This was the moment for the second, more powerful confrontation. This was where the case against her would be irrevocably built. "With all due respect, Mr. Harrison," I began, my tone even and respectful, "I cannot do that. The files are indeed my work. I spent 6 months developing that strategy, and as Veronica herself so clearly stated in yesterday's meeting, I am considered too junior to lead it. Therefore, I am not comfortable releasing the highly detailed execution phase of my work to someone else without proper attribution and oversight." "Attribution?" Mr. Harrison barked, his face turning red. "Veronica presented a brilliant strategy yesterday. She has been working tirelessly on this." "Did she?" I asked, turning my head to look directly at Veronica. "Veronica, can you please tell Mr. Harrison the 5 key principles of the digital authenticity ecosystem you presented? Or perhaps explain the weighting you applied to the demographic data to arrive at the 25% market share projection." Veronica froze. Her eyes darted between me and Mr. Harrison. These were not high-level talking points. They were deep, foundational details of the strategy, details she had never bothered to learn. We are a team," she stammered, falling back on vague corporate platitudes. "The specifics are in the documentation. We don't have time to get bogged down in minutiae." I turned back to Mr. Harrison. "She can't answer because she doesn't know. She didn't create it. I did." He looked from her panicked face to my calm one, and for the first time, a seed of doubt was planted in his mind. He was a man who hated messy details, but he also hated being made a fool of. This was the moment to deliver the final, irrefutable piece of evidence. "Actually, Mr. Harrison," I said, my voice dropping slightly, making him lean in to hear, "this whole situation can be cleared up quite easily. To ensure all key stakeholders were aware of the initiative's potential, I took the liberty of sending the complete 112-page strategy document to Mr. Sterling last Tuesday for his review." The color drained from Mr. Harrison's face. The mention of the CEO's name changed the entire dynamic of the room. This was no longer an internal squabble within his department. I had escalated it to the highest possible level. "You what?" he whispered. The email had the full proposal attached, including all of Phase 1 and Phase 2, I continued, pressing my advantage. "It's time-stamped, of course. Perhaps you could just check with him? I'm sure he can forward you the original files. All the assets are attached to that email, fully accessible to him and clearly authored by me." A checkmate. Veronica looked like she had seen a ghost. Her carefully constructed reality had just been shattered by a single, undeniable fact. She hadn't just stolen from a junior employee. She had presented stolen work to the entire executive team while the real, documented proof was sitting in the CEO's inbox. Mr. Harrison slowly sank into his high-backed leather chair, his eyes wide with the horrifying realization of his own misjudgment. He had been played. He had publicly lauded Veronica, endorsed her promotion, and was now implicated in her fraud. He looked at Veronica, then at me, and it was clear he finally understood who was telling the truth. The power in the room had shifted, completely and irrevocably. The call came the next morning. It was from Mr. Sterling's executive assistant. "Mr. Sterling would like to see you, Mr. Harrison, Veronica Vance, and Daphne Miller in the main boardroom at 10 a.m. Her voice was clipped and professional, but the message was clear. This was a summit. This was the final act. I walked into the boardroom at 9:58. It was a vast, intimidating space on the top floor, with panoramic views of the city I barely noticed. Mr. Harrison was already there, looking pale and nervous. Veronica stood by the window, her back to the room, a rigid statue of denial. She refused to look at me. At precisely 10 a.m., Mr. Sterling entered. He was a man in his late 60s, with sharp, intelligent eyes and an air of quiet authority that commanded more respect than Mr. Harrison's bluster ever could. He wasn't carrying a laptop or a notepad. He just walked to the head of the table and stood there for a moment, his gaze sweeping over the three of us. "Please sit," he said. His voice was calm, almost gentle, which was somehow more terrifying than if he had been shouting. We all sat. The silence stretched for a full minute. Finally, Mr. Sterling looked at Veronica. "Veronica," he began, "yesterday, Mr. Harrison was presented with a situation regarding the project files for an initiative you are leading called Project Titan. Is that correct?" "Yes, Mr. Sterling," Veronica said, her voice thin. "And Mr. Harrison informs me that you presented the strategy for this project to the leadership team 2 days ago. A strategy you claimed was your own," he continued. "I led the effort, yes," she said, clinging to her story. Mr. Sterling nodded slowly. He picked up a remote, and the large screen at the end of the boardroom flickered to life. On it was the title slide of the presentation Veronica had given. Project Titan, a new strategy for a new generation, presented by Veronica Vance. "This is the presentation you gave?" he asked. "Yes," she confirmed. Mr. Sterling clicked a button on the remote. The screen changed. It was now displaying an email. My email. The timestamp Tuesday, August 3, 2025, 11:48 p.m. was visible in the top right corner. The attachment, Project Titan Full Strategy D. Miller, PDF, was listed at the bottom. "Daphne," Mr. Sterling said, turning to me, "last week you sent me this email, correct?" "Yes, sir, I did," I replied, my voice steady. He turned his gaze back to Veronica. Her face was ashen. "So, Veronica, we have a problem. You presented this strategy on Wednesday. Ms. Miller here sent me the exact same strategy, in far greater detail, the night before. Can you help me understand that discrepancy?" Veronica opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She was trapped. The digital proof was absolute, displayed on a 10-foot screen for everyone to see. The lies she had built her career on were crumbling around her in real time. "It was a collaborative document," she finally managed to stammer. "Daphne was assisting me. She must have sent an early draft without my knowledge." Mr. Sterling's expression didn't change. "I see. A collaborative document. In that case, you should have no trouble accessing the encrypted Phase 2 files. Daphne, would you mind?" He gestured to a laptop on the table. I stood up, walked to the laptop, and typed in my password. Then I navigated to the server and clicked on the locked folder. I entered the 24-character alphanumeric key from memory. The folder opened instantly, revealing the dozens of subfolders and documents within. "There you are, Mr. Sterling," I said, "the full execution plan." He nodded. "Thank you, Daphne. You can sit down." Then he looked at Veronica, and the gentleness in his voice was finally gone, replaced by a cold, hard steel. "This company is built on 2 things, innovation and integrity," he said, his voice quiet but echoing in the silent room. "You have shown a remarkable aptitude for identifying innovation, but you have demonstrated a complete and utter lack of integrity. You did not lead this project, you stole it. You did not mentor your subordinate, you tried to ruin her career to advance your own. That is not something we tolerate here." He looked at Mr. Harrison, whose face was a mixture of shame and fear. "And Richard," Mr. Sterling said, his voice sharp, "your inability to see this, your failure to perform due diligence and properly manage your team, has been noted. You have a great deal of work to do to regain my trust." Finally, he looked back at Veronica. "Your employment here is terminated, effective immediately. Security will escort you to your desk to collect your personal belongings, and then they will escort you from the building." It was a clinical, brutal, and public execution of a career. Veronica just sat there, motionless, staring at the screen displaying my email, the source of her downfall. She didn't cry or protest. She implied deflated, all the ambition and arrogance draining out of her, until she was just a small, defeated figure in an expensive suit. Mr. Sterling stood up. "Daphne, please stay. Richard, you are dismissed." Mr. Harrison practically fled the room. A moment later, 2 security guards entered and stood silently by the door. Veronica rose from her chair like a robot and walked out of the boardroom, her career at this company over. The showdown was finished. Justice, swift and absolute, had been served. After Veronica and Mr. Harrison had gone, Mr. Sterling sat back down. The intimidating aura was gone, replaced by the weary look of a leader who had just had to clean up a mess. "Daphne," he said, his voice now carrying a tone of sincere respect. "First, I want to apologize. You should never have been put in that position. It was a failure of management, and for that, I am sorry." "Thank you, Mr. Sterling," I said, my own adrenaline finally beginning to subside. "I read your entire proposal the night you sent it," he continued. "I was going to call a meeting with you and Harrison this week anyway. Your work is more than a marketing strategy. It's a new vision for the entire company. It's exactly the kind of bold thinking I've been asking for." He paused, looking me directly in the eye. "The title Director, Project Titan, is now vacant. I want you to fill it, effective immediately. You will report directly to Mr. Harrison, but I want a weekly progress report sent directly to me. I trust you to see this through, and I will ensure you have every resource you need." I was stunned, not just a vindication, but a promotion. The very role Veronica had tried to steal was now mine, handed to me by the CEO himself. "Mr. Sterling, I don't know what to say. Thank you. I won't let you down." "I know you won't," he said with a small smile. "You've already proven your competence and, more importantly, your character." The weeks that followed were a blur of intense, gratifying work. Mr. Harrison was a changed man. He was humbled, deferential, and genuinely supportive, offering his help but staying out of my way. The cloud of his mistake hung over him, and he seemed determined to make amends by being the boss he should have been all along. The marketing team, having witnessed the dramatic fall of Veronica and my subsequent rise, rallied behind me with a new level of respect and enthusiasm. Maya became my unofficial second-in-command, and together we launched Project Titan. It was a resounding success. The new campaigns resonated, the app went viral, and for the first time in a decade, our brand was considered cool. Veronica, I heard through the grapevine, was unable to find another job in the industry. The story of her corporate espionage, though not made public, spread quietly through executive channels. She had become toxic. Her downfall was as complete as it was deserved. One evening, about a month after the showdown, Maya and I were working late, looking over the first positive sales data. We ordered pizza to the office to celebrate. "You know," Maya said, leaning back in her chair, "I still can't believe how you handled it. You were so calm. I would have been screaming from day one." I smiled, thinking back to that awful meeting where I had sat silently, sipping my coffee. "Screaming wouldn't have worked," I said. "She had all the power, and she wanted me to act like a victim. The only way to win was to not play her game. I had to build my own." In that moment, I felt a profound sense of peace. The hurt and betrayal were distant echoes, replaced by the quiet confidence of knowing my own worth. I hadn't just won back my project, I had reclaimed my own narrative. My work, my integrity, and my foresight had spoken for themselves, louder than any lie Veronica could ever tell. The taste of victory wasn't loud or explosive. It was quiet, satisfying, and tasted a lot like success.